I particularly liked the forced rhyme of sassy, frassy, and lassie with Haley Selassie.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of 1001 Album Complaints. This is the show where lifelong friends, musicians, and guys who annoy everyone else at the dinner party get together to talk about albums from Robert Dimery's list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. We will listen to some tracks, give some background on the artist leading up to the recording and the recording process. We will make fun of this band. So that is just a little disclaimer here. We are going to make fun of this band as much as we appreciate anyone who goes out and puts themselves on tape. We do understand that there's a lot to make fun of. So after we have gotten our pokes in, we will then vote and tell you whether or not you really need to hear this album before you die. Now, this week we have done something a little different. This is part of our summer series where we, the hosts of this show, are picking albums that we believe were notable snubs on Robert Dimery's list. And so we throw it out to you, the fans, through our Patreon page and let you vote on which albums you think were left off. We gave you a choice of 3, and this week it was my selection, and I put out to you all Townes Van Zant's debut album, Townes Van Zant, the album by the Unicorns, Who Will Cut Our Hair When We're Gone, and the album that won the poll, The Mollusk by the band Ween. So the fans have spoken. They want to hear us chatter on about Ween. It was relatively close, but Ween did win out in the end. So we are covering the June 24th, 1997 release on Elektra Records, The Mollusk by Ween. Now, if you are not familiar with this album, we are going to play a little bit of the opening track on this album. Now, before we play the track, I want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. I specifically picked this track because I think it is a good introduction to Ween. There is a trope that happens on many Ween albums where very early on in the album, they try to get you to stop listening. They try to take the casual listener and just turn them off immediately. And then there's a lot of good stuff after that, but you have to fight your way through it to get to the good stuff on the album. So in that spirit, we're going to play to you, again, mind you, the opening track on their album, The Mollusk. This is Dancing in the Show. No, we are going to be getting into this week and what we have been listening to. I'm going to guess a few of you guys are going to say suffering through this week. We are going to throw it around the room for an exceptionally mean tweet-length review. And I am going to go first to Adam.
Hey, everybody. This is Adam, and my tweet is music made by pretentious assholes for pretentious assholes. The latter of which, if they could just let their guard down for an hour, would find that this album is actually kind of fun.
All right. I'm getting converts already.
I'm glad we changed the descriptor to mean tweets recently because...
Yeah, you're going to come in hot. Well, it's your turn. I've queued you up there.
No, I was referencing Adam's tweet. I'm not going to come in that hot. But my tweet length review is, you've got to admire the confidence of a band that fills an entire album with sea shanties, schizoid genre hopping, and country songs about dicks. Yet it somehow ends up being possibly their most normal album.
Yes, that is actually true. Yeah. All right, Rob, what do you got?
I was going to say, after that disclaimer, Tom, about us poking fun, do you think these guys have a sense of humor? I'm not really sure.
They would be pissed if we didn't make fun of them. I think that's accurate.
Every person that I saw interviewed about them said that they were all extraordinarily nice people who are super approachable and will just like meet the fans that come to their town to see them. They're apparently very cool guys.
Very cool. Well, this is Rob here, and I'm excited to get into it. My tweet length review of The Mollusk is as follows. Like the roses of which they once sang, Gene and Dean Ween are free. They're free of constraints about melodies or arrangements. They're free of conventions on what even counts as a song or a band or an offensive lead vocal. And accordingly, they are also free of any conventional hits, significant fame, or fans that contribute meaningfully to polite society.
So because this is a very special episode that was voted on by you, the fans, we have solicited some tweet-length reviews on our Patreon page, and thankfully, you guys have come through again with some fantastic tweet-length reviews. So here we go. Listener Brian says, "The Mollusk captures the innocence and joy of children's music, reinterpreted by a band who aren't allowed within 500 yards of a school."
Damn, I hate that that's better than any of my tweets.
I know. I'm a little jealous.
Very well done, Brian. And Stan provides us with this tweet. "While far from Jeaner and Diener's brownest effort, this collection of nautical-themed genre homages and parodies is nevertheless a surreal dive into the brown bong water depths." And yes, I would agree, except for I would say instead of bong water, it's probably the brown acid that they were on. So this album reeks of acid. Thank you so much to everybody who contributed. We love hearing from our fans. All right. This is Tom. I will be taking us on this journey into the dark aquarium that is the Mollusk. And just a little background before I give my tweet length review. I have been a Ween fan since the late 90s. And this album is not my favorite album of theirs, but it is their favorite album of theirs. And I think that that means something. And I also think that when it comes to accessibility, believe it or not, listeners, this is by far their most accessible album and a good way to get into the band that is Ween. So my tweet length review is half the demented ramblings of acid casualty sex offenders, half intricately layered complex musical exploration. The Mollusk is a dark journey into the twisted psyche of Dean and Jean Ween. It is somehow both challenging and charming, and I think it is the perfect encapsulation of the singular project that is Ween. So,
Wow. All right.
let's get into our general impressions. Let's throw it out to somebody that I know has never heard a note of this before. Adam, what was your general impression?
As you were listing the 3 potential albums that we were going to talk about this week, I had heard of none of them. So this gives permission to the audience that if you have never heard a note of any of those, welcome to the party. First time through, I wanted to hate this album so much. And the more I listened, I was angry because I didn't hate it. There's something charming and childish, and like you said, it's unhinged, but I don't know if these guys take themselves too seriously. And I had this thought in my head, and I think Rob, maybe a decade ago, we were talking about Frank Zappa. I feel like you kind of gave me permission to say, like, I just don't like Frank Zappa. Like, he's crazy and he's out there and everything, and it's okay to not like that. But Frank Zappa is one of those people that I feel is so highfalutin about the art and about what they're doing. And these guys are just weird and don't care. So I think I appreciate them more than I do the Frank Zappas of the world.
I think the music is significantly more listenable too, for the record. And
Sure.
And I've spent a lot of time with a lot of Frank Zappa records, and I have enjoyed them. But I would just say, in general, listen, this is Rob here, and I will say that I came into this week not knowing the record super well, but I've heard Ween over the years. I'm more familiar with one of their other records from back in the day from listening to it, but I wouldn't call myself like their biggest fan. I have seen them live. It was a great show. And I like weird stuff, generally. So I want to support the weird.
Right.
I did want to like the record. And man, is this strange and weird. But that said, my feeling coming into the week of listening was one of consternation, because I was afraid I wasn't going to like it. And I was going to both disappoint Tom and our listeners who voted for it. But the reality is it grew on me a lot. And I do agree with Tom's take on wading through some BS kind of throughout the length of the record and perhaps their career. But man, I'll tell you what, here's one thing you cannot call these guys is lazy. They work. The production is kind of excellent and interesting throughout. The textures, the ideas, the sounds, the treatments. There's just a ton of, there's no lack of creativity or effort here, which I like.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and this is much more polished than some of the albums that came before this. And I got to start with, I think, my journey with Ween. I also didn't get into them in a formal way until a little bit later, maybe early 2000s-ish. And part of that was because I had always been hung up on, do you guys remember Beavis and Butthead when they did the Push the Little Daisies video?
Oh, yeah.
So that was my first ever exposure to Ween. If you've never seen it, there's one of Ween's, it might be their first video, I don't know, but they're on Beavis and Butthead and they do that song Push the Little Daisies. And it's a terrible song. Full stop. It's a horrible song.
No, hard disagree.
That's a horrible song. But Beavis and Butthead ripped the shit out of them. In fact, I remember one of the lyrics, he's like, and I'm a loser. And then Beavis just goes, yeah, he is a loser. And for some reason, that just stuck with me so much. I did come to like this band over time. This isn't my favorite album either. But I've really never been able to define my actual opinion on them because I think on one hand, they are, in my mind, A-plus musicians and songwriters. And I think they do write a lot of earnest and heartfelt songs. But I do think too much of their stuff feels very disposable. And I don't have a problem with the weirdness necessarily or the comedy, that angle to the extent you want to call it that. I do have a hard time with the idea that it seems like almost half of their shit in general is just throwaway music. And so I'm still sort of reckoning with that, even though in general I had a positive impression of this record.
Listen, I would agree that some of their songs are not successful. I wouldn't necessarily say they have a lot of throwaway songs. On every album, there's one or two songs where like nothing happens the entire time. And that's clearly disposable throwaway crap. And one of the songs we'll talk about today is my low point because I feel like it is just very stock. It's basic. There's not a whole lot happens. But I do think that one of the things that really attracts me to this band, and you all know me in this call, and you all know me from listening to my ramblings for the last 170 plus episodes, fans, I don't like bands that take themselves super seriously, and that is the exact opposite of Ween. Adam, you are right. They know exactly what they are and what they're doing. There's a great anecdote where in like 2001, some major advertising firm hired them to write a song for Pizza Hut, who had just made this pizza called the Insider that had all of the cheese was inside the crust. And so, they don't make a lot of money. They're not like a hugely successful band. And they get this gig to write a song for a commercial for Pizza Hut. It was going to pay them a good amount of money. And the song that they gave to Pizza Hut was called Where'd the Cheese Go? And it has lines in it like, bitch, where's the motherfucking cheese at? They very much are like, oh, huge opportunity. We don't care.
Wait, did they get the money before they actually handed in the
I don't think they got paid for that one.
Okay. Well, this is where, I feel bad, but that kind of self-sabotage, that might be a different kind of psychosis than what got put on the tape here,
Well, we'll talk about it a little bit, but I do think that the town New Hope, Pennsylvania kind of plays a prominent role in the band Ween and their overall ethos. And frankly, they are like, hey, we kind of had small, crappy houses in New Hope, and we knew everybody in the town, and we were really happy with our lives, and so we didn't really need a ton of money and a ton of fame. We just want to be able to keep making music and be able to live doing that. And it turned into something much bigger than they ever thought it was going to be, but they certainly never set out to become like rock stars that were going to be ruling the radio or anything like that. There's like, if people like our music, that's really cool. And I just want to keep making it.
Although if you're from New Hope now, you ain't poor. That's not like a poor area by any means. A very nice area, not too far from where we all grew up, actually. So, I like that local connection. But yeah, I don't know. Adam, not to pick on you or anything, I was a little surprised at the comment that of pretentiousness. I think there is pretentiousness as far as there is something lurking here that has like art school sort of vibes that I don't tend to like. But I think as dudes, I actually interpret some of this as like the opposite of them saying like, I don't give a fuck, to their detriment in some ways.
I think that's a crumbling cliff to be standing on. This idea of I don't give a fuck. Because they clearly put time and effort into everything they do. And they are a going concern, or they were for many years. They toured. I'm just saying that can also be used as a defense mechanism. And I think, although I come away this week with a very positive feeling about the band, they do seem like cool guys, and the music itself, for the most part, some of the songs do make, this is to speak to the pretentious comment, some of the songs make me feel like I'm an asshole for listening to it. And that doesn't feel great.
Well, that might be your own psychosis there. I've never once felt like an asshole for listening to Ween. I will agree that when it comes to the pretentious comment, I always view pretension in music as I'm going to present to you something terrible and be like, don't you like this? Or are you too square and conventional to get what I'm doing? And the product seems to have a bit of that in it, but I don't think that is the thought process behind the creation of the product.
Sure.
I get what you're saying, and I'm not even necessarily arguing with it. I don't know the guys personally in Ween, obviously, but people have a way of coming off. Morrissey comes off like a pretentious dick, and that colors what you think about his music. I get it. And these guys seem like normal, down-to-earth dudes. I'm just pointing out that it's like a relatively surface level and subjective way of thinking about how people want to present themselves.
And for me to say Adam hasn't heard something, that's not a stretch. But I feel like this is the band where you say that you've never heard them. You've never heard of Ween? What's wrong with you? You grew up in the 90s? That's the vibe I got.
Yes.
Now, if you want to get into like the fan base, there is definitely some hipster, cult, pretentious shit. Absolutely. But I think the Zappa thing to me was spot on in thinking of sort of a pretentious asshole. When you hear him in interviews, I mean, there's no doubting his genius. I'm a big fan. But when he talks about his art and his approach, he comes across like an asshole.
Right.
Some people make it easy to like them. Other people make it more challenging. I get it. I'm not denying that. I'm simply saying that they do want to be liked. I don't buy that people put out music and don't want people to like it to some extent.
I would say it's not that they don't want to be liked. I think that part of what they don't fall into the trap of is this, what I'm doing is important and deep. They do not think that. They are like, what I do is fun. And I think it's cool and it amuses me, and other people seem to really like it, and so that's awesome. As opposed to like, don't you get the message behind this song? Like the wandering eye of the mollusk is like the eye of Brahman that looks at us. You're like, shut the like. There's none
they
of that.
leave that, thankfully, for the weirdo fans, which I agree. The fans, I've been in the subreddit for a little while, just observing, just lurking, just seeing what's out there. And man, there is some lore about this band. There is some deep insanity going on in the fanship.
I've had to restrict myself from going on to Reddit, period, in trying to look up this stuff, because everyone thinks everything is like the best record ever made when you start getting into Reddit, and that shit drives me insane.
Well, and there's also a lot of the unsubstantiated types. A band like this, who is very willing to feed into that in like a playful way, and then it kind of snowballs, and they're like, wait, hold on a second. Like on their second album, The Pod, they put in the liner notes, like as a joke, that they were huffing Scotch Guard the entire time making the album. And then like when their fans were like, yeah, that's awesome, I was huffing Scotch Guard and listening to your albums. They're like, no. That was the most scumbag thing we thought we could say, and we said it because it's funny. Don't take it seriously. This is not what we're going for here.
I would let those people keep huffing the Scotch Guard, and hopefully that problem takes care of itself.
Fail themselves out of the gene pool.
Perhaps you're going to address it in the story, Tom, but then this kind of ballooned into a rumor, or maybe it's not a rumor, that they did individual specific drugs for each album they made. And that, for whatever reason, that idea was in my head this week, and I feel like I had to go online and attempt to debunk that. I didn't find anything super satisfying, but...
Yeah, that is one of those fan lore things that has been built up, where they're like, oh, they were like huffing nitrous while they wrote Pure Guava, and they were on heroin while they were... And that's just not true. everything that I can find from them is just like, yeah, we're not, it's not, I mean, like, we do drugs. Don't get me wrong. We do drugs, but it is not this kind of like very targeted and specific. I went through a heroin phase so I can make this album. No, it's just like, we just do drugs and they're fun.
I think Lou Reed perfected the formula by just doing heroin on every single album. Just keeps things consistent that way.
That's a knife edge to dance on there. That one could bite you. So let's talk a little bit about the background of the artists leading up to the creation of this album, The Mollusk. So Ween is the brainchild of two friends from New Hope, PA, Aaron Freeman and Mickey Malchiato. So more commonly known by the stage names of Gene and Dean Ween. Gene is Aaron, Dean is Mickey. So they hail from New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is a small town. It's about a half hour north of Philadelphia, right on the border with New Jersey. And again, like I said, it kind of plays a role in the story of Ween. It had always been this artsy enclave known for its theater and music scene. And one thing that I learned this week that I was not aware of is that New Hope, PA was traditionally where many musicals were tested out and fine-tuned before they would debut on Broadway. And so there was a playhouse in, I think it was called like the Bucks County Playhouse in New Hope, that would put on these big Broadway productions with the actual Broadway stars before they would debut on Broadway. So it led to a bunch of these like composers and writers and musicians and Broadway stars getting second homes in New Hope in like the 70s and the 80s so that they could then live down there for periods while they were sort of testing out their material, which led to a lot of interest in the arts, a lot of funding for the arts. You know, you have a lot of kind of rich and very successful, very artsy people living in the community, and it became one of those sort of magnets for people in the area to move there because they wanted that kind of experience.
That's interesting.
Kind of similar to Austin, how Austin, the city, invested very heavily in their orchestra in, I think, the 60s or something like that, and brought a lot of really talented orchestra musicians to the Austin area. And that's one of the things that led to the Austin music explosion later, as those people were like having kids and getting involved in their schools. And, you know, the music programs were off the charts because you had all of this musical talent that had been drawn there because of a conscious investment from the city. And so it leads to, as you're just growing up, even if you are not a kid who would traditionally be thought of as somebody who's super into music, music's everywhere. It's kind of all around you. And so a lot of people got into music.
It's a cool town. It reminded me almost of a mini sort of Woodstock, not as far as the Woodstock festival type of thing, but just the artsy kind of vibe, a little bit more upscale, but that seems to be more the influence of like the Bucks County, the folks that are more well-heeled, that have started coming to the area more. But it's a cool town for sure.
In the time that they were coming about, because they were both born in 1970, it was way less of an affluent area, and it was more kind of like, I wouldn't say blue collar working class, but there's a lot in California. There's a lot of these like very artsy mountain towns that are getting a lot of attention now, and the property values have gone up. But traditionally they were kind of like working class, but also very artsy. And it kind of had that vibe going for it. You know, it's a progressive town. It's very liberal. It's a small town. And in a progressive, liberal, small town, if you're a weird kid, like, how do you rebel in a town that's kind of permissive and a kind of like very liberal and progressive town? Well, you basically start a band whose name is a dick joke. So both Aaron and Mickey, born in 1970, Aaron was born in Philadelphia, Mickey's born in Trenton. They end up meeting in the 80s. They kind of knew each other, but they weren't really friends. And so they end up meeting in junior high because they got sat next to each other for a typing class. Now, again, like I said, pretty small, but they don't particularly like each other at the time because Mickey was kind of like a jock asshole, according to Aaron. And according to Mickey, Aaron was kind of like a trench coat wearing weirdo, you know, kind of emo kid. And they just really didn't think that they had much in common. I get the vibes that it was like Emilio Estevez and Judd Nelson in The Breakfast Club type of guys, you know, like, and then they get stuck together and all of a sudden they realize they got a lot in common. You know, we really kind of like the same things. Mickey, despite being, again, like kind of a jock, also has a fanzine that he is creating where he's putting out, and he's going to the record store every day buying records. He's described as like a very outgoing, kind of like precocious, pretentious kid, like who at 13 was like, I got my own zine, writing articles about the local music scene and stuff like that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And again, it shows something that Rob talked about, which is that they are workhorses. They really do create a lot of material. They don't sit on their laurels a whole lot. Now, they have become less creative as they've gotten older and gotten more successful, but they really do make kind of a lot of albums.
Well, I think it goes back to something that we've talked about on the show, whether it was bands like CCR or you go down the list, but there's something about the people who they're already friends when they start the band, and it cuts through a lot of noise, I think, and it helps. I think when you're forming a band with people that you're already friends with, you can more quickly get to that common language that you're looking for. And so they obviously have had some kind of simpatico thing, to be able to do it that long. And yeah, so I think there's something to be said for that.
Versus putting something in the classified ads saying, hey, looking for a songwriter. And then you go through 100 people and you're like, wow, you're terrible. We don't mesh at all. Yeah.
Band forming, need keyboard, guitar, drums, and singer.
Writer and singer.
Searching for enemies for next band.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things is your friends inform your tastes so much that when your tastes line up, it makes it so much easier to make art together, because there's not I don't even like the kind of music that you like. So when you achieve what you think is a great song, I'm like, I hate that song because I just don't like that kind of music. But if you like the same kind of music, it's a lot easier to
So why are you guys friends with me? That's a question. I don't know. If you saw my Hoobastank collection, man, you would close it down.
Collection.
So they meet, they're 14 years old. They decide, hey, we got a lot in common. We should form a band. And just to give you an idea of where they are maturity-wise, they decide to call their band Ween, because it is a portmanteau of the words wuss and penis mushed together. And so that is where the name Ween came from.
Wow.
Excellent.
And can you confirm if they knew the term portmanteau at that age?
Oh, I can guarantee you they did not.
How about Weenus? No, let's just go Ween.
Yeah, so sure there were lots of iterations that were kicked around. They probably had, again, the piece of loose leaf with all the different names written on it. One of them was probably wuss and one of them was probably penis. And they're like, hey, you know what? We can't name the band Penis, but we can name the band Ween. And I learned that this week, that's where the name came from. But Ween has always been very evocative of a dick. Like the entire time. It's like you can't hear the name Ween for a band like this and be like, oh yeah, there's something dick related to that. That's got to be a dick joke. They also decide that Aaron and Mickey, not going to do it. They are going to create alter egos, Dean and Gene Ween, for their band. Which, honestly, stroke of genius at 14 years old to be like, yeah, you know what? Dean and Gene Ween, that's a pretty hot band. We should totally do that.
Yeah, I'm already in at this point in the conversation. Like, I'm excited about the band now.
Yeah, totally. There is a great clip of them playing their first show in 1986 at their high school talent show. And I don't know if it's one of them, but before they come on stage, there's like an announcer that is hyping them up and saying like a band of legends in the area, literally like just making up a whole bunch of shit. They said, described by NME as the best thing since cheese. Like, it's just super weird. And they go on for kind of a long time.
And they're 14 years old.
And then they get on stage and they're fucking terrible. They're so bad. But they have this swagger and presence that actually really kind of works well. Like, they sound terrible, but they look like they're having a great time. And everybody's kind of responding to them just sort of dancing around, just shout singing over a really crappy guitar. Because 2 guitars and a drummer at the time. They brought in this guy, Chris Williams, a.k.a. Mean Ween, on drums. And he shows up on some of the albums later. In fact, on this one as well. But yeah, surprisingly, they actually kind of get a following. And they start to play some gigs around town. We're going to get into that. But first, we're going to do our favorite segment on the podcast. We are going to do Ween by the numbers. Now, The first number that I'm going to throw out is 131 million, which is the number of streams for their most popular song, Ocean Man. And then the next number I'm going to throw out is 117 million, which is how many more streams Ocean Man has than their second most streamed song. It falls off very precipitously.
It's a long way to the bottom. I noticed that too.
Yeah. And we'll get into why later, but 1,473. That was the population of New Hope, Pennsylvania in 1980 when Ween were getting their start.
Wow, small. That is small. Yeah, yeah.
You think 30 miles north of Philly, it's going to be bigger, but it's really a small town. The next number is 69, which is the number of people in Dean and Jean Ween's graduating high school class. So again, very small, and I had to include that because it was 69.
Someone tells me they orchestrated that somehow, like it was 70 and they like killed one guy to
Killed a guy for a sex joke.
They just convinced one of them to drop out. Like, yeah, just drop out. That'll be better that way. The next number is also 69. Woo! That is the highest chart position for this album on the Australian charts. They, for some reason, have always been way bigger in Australia than they have been in the United States.
Everything's upside down there, as we know.
Yeah. The next number that we're going to throw out there is the number 10. And that is the number of tracks on their album 12 Golden Country Greats, which has always just tickled me pink.
Hang on. The album title is 12 and the track quantity is 10?
Yes. The
I
album is
kinda
12
love that.
Golden
I
Country
kinda
Greats
love
with 10
that.
tracks. It's pretty great, yeah.
It's actually
Awesome.
a decent album. They go really all in on the country genre.
We'll get into that. It's quite good, and it's completely nonsensical the way that they even came about getting to that album. But more on that later. The next number that we're going to throw out is at least one, and that is the number of tracks on every Ween album that actively try to get you to stop listening. I think we can identify at least one, maybe two on this album. We'll talk about that later. And then the last number that we're going to throw out is, again, at least one, and that is the number of very successful franchises that were directly inspired by this album.
Really?
We'll touch on that later. If you guys don't know the story behind it, we'll get to it at some point in the retelling.
Ooh, all right.
And before we get back into the story of Ween, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for listening. We really do have a ton of fun doing this. We hope you have a ton of fun listening. Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers and just visitors who voted on this album, forcing me to do the research on this, because there's not a whole lot of info on Ween. You'd think that there would be. There's not a whole lot of verifiable info on Ween, but
It's mostly Reddit.
we love doing this. We started doing this mostly for ourselves, and the response that we've gotten from all of you listeners has been fantastic, and we really feel like we have a good tribe of people that listen to along with us to these albums, and we get some great opinions on the Patreon. If you guys want to go check it out, 1001 Album Complaints on Patreon. We have our 70s one-hit wonder song battle up there. We have our Guilty Pleasures episodes up there. There's a lot of good extra material on there that you can check out for the low price of $5 a month. But if you just want to join for free, you can participate in the polls. You can get into the conversation because there's some great conversation going on over there. So thank you all for listening. Let's get back into this story of Ween. So we're going to level set. They played their first show in 1986 at their high school talent show. They're terrible, but they are still surprisingly charming, and they are charismatic enough that they start to get a following. It's not entirely surprising that they were not great on stage, because Mickey did say at the time that they were specifically trying to be obnoxious. And by at that time, I think he might mean to this very day. But
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
so, despite sounding terrible, their swagger and stage presence makes that band work. They get a pretty decent response, and they decide, hey, let's keep making music. Let's keep playing shows. However, this 2-guitar player and a drummer format is not exactly what the crowds want. They need to mix that up. So they decide to go with just 2 guitar players and backing tracks recorded on a DAT tape and played behind them. So that's what you see when you see Ween for the first many, many, many years of their time as a band. It's just two guys on stage and there's pre-recorded backing tracks playing. And one of them's playing a guitar. The other one's sometimes playing a guitar and singing. It's a bizarre
The touring's expensive, man. You got to cut the fat.
No, they're not touring. They're not playing more than 40 miles away from New Hope at this time.
Even more true.
Yeah, the hubris there is great because I think in my mind I always assumed that, like, let's say their daylight counterparts, they might be giants, that these two guys played a plethora of instruments above and beyond guitar. But the fact that they only play guitar is really funny.
Yeah. And I just don't understand why they chose to go that route, because it's also not like the guy who was playing drums with them in high school, Mean Ween, wasn't down with the project, because he still kind of plays with them some to this day. I think they were just like, it's not really working out, dude. We're going to replace you with literally nothing. We're going to replace you with a recording of someone else, of me on a drum machine.
Hey, less mistakes.
So with this completely weird and unique setup of two guitar players, a singer, and a backing track recorded and played over the PA, they say, hey, let's go get some gigs. And at the time, Mickey is 16 and he's working at the local gas station. And he is somewhat acquainted, because it's a very small town, with this couple that owns the one big music venue in town called John and Peter's. So apparently every time they would come to the gas station, Mickey would just like open their car door and throw a tape into there, and like they'd like come back and just find a tape on the seat and be like, what the hell is this? And so
It's guerrilla marketing, man.
yeah, the guy apparently like throws it into the back all the time, and he's like, I just keep getting these tapes every time I come to the gas station. Doesn't listen to them for a long time, and then eventually listens to them and likes what he hears. Sort of.
I feel like that explains my sentiment on this band.
Yeah. That's everyone's
Like, in
feeling
general.
after hearing this band for the first time.
So when I tell you that their first songs were pretty juvenile, remember that the Mollusk is the mature, several albums in version of Ween, and these are 16-year-olds making these songs. They are extremely juvenile. So again, there's kind of a charm to them. Like, one of the songs is literally like just Mickey singing about like how much he despises New Hope and hates working at the gas station, and like is using gay slurs for all the people that he has to pump gas for and stuff. Yeah.
Very 80s.
Very 80s.
I think the way that I found out that they were actually from the Philly area was when I don't know if it was that show that you're referring to, the talent show, but this was years ago, somehow go down a rabbit hole and came across one of their early shows that looked like it was high school-esque. And I saw that they had a song called Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese. And if you're from this area, anything egg and cheese that has a breakfast meat on it is like quintessential Philly, New York. And it's fucking delicious, by the way. But when I saw that they were writing songs called Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese, I was like, these guys don't give a shit. And they're definitely from this area.
Yeah. That made it on to their second album, Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese.
Ah, how about that?
All right, there it is.
So they are, again, trying to do this guerrilla marketing campaign to get themselves some kind of buzz. But what they're also doing is they are just creating EPs and just distributing them amongst their friends. And these are literally they have a 4-track tape recorder, they have a drum machine, and they are making songs and making tapes and then manually copying the tapes and physically writing stuff on them and handing them out to their friends. But over the course of 1985, as far as I can tell, they create and release the EPs Mrs. Slack, Chris Hokie, Mike Banks, Kim Tullio, and John Ward, which I assume are just the names of the people that they made the tapes for. And we're like, here's a tape that I made for this guy, and we made a bunch of copies and handed them out.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
85, you said. 85, they're doing this.
This is 85 that they're doing this.
Wow. All right.
So then in 86, they create the EP Erica Peterson's Flaming Crib Death. In 1987, they create The Crucial Squeegee Lip. I'm pretty sure he was still working at the gas station. And then in 1988, they create Ween 2, Axe as Bold as Boognish, and The Live Brain Wedgie. So the sense of humor has been there from the beginning. It's kind of baked into the product from day one. Surprisingly, this ends up working, and they start gigging. They start playing around town. They're playing in the sort of greater Philadelphia, southern New Jersey area, but they play at John and Peter's in New Hope, and they get a gig at a club in Trenton called City Gardens, which is, Rob, probably kind of like Bottom of the Hill. Nationally touring acts would come through, and they would open for them as these nationally touring acts would come through. So, 500-600 person room at most that has some cachet and gets some cool bands coming through. I mean, the Foo Fighters weren't playing there, but, they opened for They Might Be Giants, Guar, Butthole Surfers, and the Rollins Band during that time. Henry Rollins, apparently huge fan of Ween. Really loved them.
The guy that formed the Rollins Band is their producer, right? We're gonna get to that in the story, yeah. Those other bands make perfect sense with Ween, for the record, though.
Totally.
Their
I mean, just
aesthetic,
the name alone of Butthole Surfers, regardless of what they actually sound like, you see that and Ween on a bill, you're going.
Yeah, totally.
But to be clear, you're talking about a bar. The place is just a bar with a stage.
Yeah, it's just like a club. Yeah. Like, I would say club is probably the most kind that you could be to it. It's closed now, but it was one of those, couple hundred, maybe up to 500 or 600 person rooms that bands would come through, probably play in New York, probably play in Philly, and they'd play Trenton in between and just play at like a, small venue or something like that.
Sure.
So they end up playing a show for their friend's band. This band is called Skunk. And then they're playing at a club in New Jersey, and Skunk is like, hey, we want you to open for us. And Ween's like, great, we'll come and open for you. Little did Ween know that David Ayers, an A&R guy from the Minneapolis-based label Twin Tone, is there to see Skunk because Twin Tone is thinking about signing Skunk. And Ween is the opening band. And he signs Ween that night. It was like, you guys are awesome. I want to sign you to my record label. Before they even signed Skunk, by the way. Like, they're thinking about maybe signing Skunk, and they see Ween, and they're like, no, we got to sign these guys right now. And they end up signing them. And they release an album in 1990, which is the one that is their official first album. It's got the pink cover with the cartoon drawing of the Boognish on it, and it's called God, Ween, Satan, the Oneness. And very much in line with a lot of stuff that will come later, they do not record any new material for this. They basically take all of the recordings that they had made in their home over the last 6 years, pick the best ones, and put them on this album. This album is 26 tracks and just a shade under 77 minutes long.
Jesus.
It is a monster of an album.
Thus begins their lack of ability to self-edit.
Yeah.
Well, can we talk about the genres that Wikipedia has put that album into? Here we go. Punk rock, heavy metal, comedy rock, experimental rock, slacker rock, and funk. I don't think you could come up with a bigger variation across the board there.
I don't agree with funk. I think I'll take everything else on there.
That's like when we did the Living Color record, and there was literally like 13 genres that I think I actually made by the numbers, so they're still the king of genre hopping.
So they released this album. They didn't have to record any new songs for it, though. And so by the time Twin Tone is ready to release God, Ween, Satan in November of 1990, they already have their next album recorded. It is called The Pod. And it is named so because that was what they called their apartment, where they recorded all of the music. It is literally them and a Tascam 4-track tape recorder in this apartment called The Pod, just making songs by themselves, no oversight. They're kind of just doing whatever the hell they want.
Is that the Tascam 388?
It's not the Tascam 388. The Tascam 388 is even better than what they were using.
Oh my gosh. Hard to imagine.
This is like a little, it's like a little 4-track version of it. It's really super crappy.
Oh, you mean it went onto like tapes you could buy at the store? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think I actually had one like that a long time ago, yeah.
So they then have yet another album ready for release. But Twin Tone, not super thrilled with the performance of God, Ween, Satan. They decide they're going to pass on releasing their next album, The Pod. And so they end up releasing it on Shimmy Disc, which is a New York-based, I'm going to shock you, indie label that decided that they were going to release it. So They're using drum machines for almost all the percussion. They're doing weird stuff like pitching their vocals, using all these kind of guitar tape effects, and just super being weird and experimental. And also, again, approaching the project with, I think, a sense of humor that I really appreciate. The cover for the pod, they literally just took the cover of Leonard Cohen's Greatest Hits, where Leonard Cohen is standing there, and they took a picture of their friend with a weird breathing apparatus on, cut the friend's head off from the picture, pasted it over Leonard Cohen's head, and that's the album cover. Like, that's kind of cool. I think that is very much in sticking with their overall ethos of like, yeah, we're still going to approach this like we're 16 years old and we're making this shit for our friends, which I can appreciate.
No, it actually is really creative, not to overly dissect something so strange, but it would have been much more obvious choice to just attempt to recreate that photo, which would have been kind of easy, to be honest. But it's the idea of like taking a separate photo and then making a collage is very strange.
Yeah, they did change the song titles on the cover. They didn't keep the original Leonard Cohen song titles. They made that change too. So, they probably got, the record company was probably like, you have to do that. You can't have Leonard Cohen. You're not covering Suzanne on this album.
Right.
Like, what the hell's wrong with you? So the pod, it's a cult hit. Doesn't sell all that well. Shocking. There's 0 sales certifications. I can't find any charting. I can't find any sales numbers on it. But it does allow them to tour extensively on it. And they end up doing a 3-leg tour from September of 91 through June of 92. And that includes a week of touring in the UK.
Wow.
And they also get to do a recording with John Peel in the BBC studios while they're on tour there. So, like, they are one of those bands. We talked about these kind of bands a lot. Their impact is so much greater than their sales because people who were tastemakers liked them and were very much like, hey, you're doing something cool and unique. Again, we talked about like Henry Rollins being a huge proponent for them, even though one of the guys from his band kind of like left the band to end up producing Ween at a point. He described them as like this lone ray of sunshine in the dark music scene of the 90s. Like Les Claypool of Primus. Again, I'm going to shock you. Les Claypool of Primus like Ween.
No.
He has said that the Mollusk was the best album that was put out in the last 20 years on the 20-year anniversary of the Mollusk. Like, he's super into it.
First of all, I saw a video with him and Dean Ween, and I couldn't get out of my head. He kept calling it the Mollusk. He insists on pronouncing it that way.
The Mollusk, yeah.
I saw that video too. It's funny, and I expected when I saw that they both had guitars, I was like, oh, maybe Claypool's busting out a guitar. No, still just jamming along on a bass. So it's got one of those resonator basses, but yeah, it was cool. He's definitely seems really into Ween. It seemed like he knew all the songs, was down.
Yeah, and also they bonded over being fishermen because they both like to fish, and so that's why they were kind of on a boat. Like I got the impression that like they were like, we're gonna do like 10 minutes interview and then we're gonna like fish for some stripers over here. Like that was actually their plan for the day, was just to get drunk and fish off the boat, which, not bad.
It's not a bad afternoon.
Yeah. So Ween catches the attention with the pod and their tour of a major label. And in 1992, they are signed to Elektra Records. Elektra's been coming up a lot on the pod recently. I think that their approach to trying to get cutting-edge bands has led to some really great experimental material, and I'm sure some flops that we've never heard of.
Sure.
But Elektra comes through, and they released their first major label album in November of 1992, which is Pure Guava. Again, they have a major record label backing, and they are like, we're not going to the studio. We have like our apartment here that we can just fuck around on a 4-track with. Why would I go to a studio? That doesn't make any sense. And so they record Pure Guava, and it contains their first, and I'm going to use big air quotes here, hit, which is Push the Little Daisies, which, yes, was famously lampooned on a Beavis and Butthead episode, but it did get Ween a wider audience. And Mike Judge actually likes Ween, but he just thought it was, funny to rip the shit out of him in that episode.
Well, if you watch the video, though, it's tailor-made to incur the wrath of Beavis.
It's come up a couple of times on the podcast, but let's talk about the Beavis and Butthead approach to breaking bands, because like, even though they're making fun of it, they're definitely also promoting it. I discovered that's definitely the first place I heard Ween. Also,
yeah.
They broke White Zombie too, I think.
Well, so fuck them.
I always think of what is it, King Missile, detachable penis.
Yeah, that's definitely the first time I heard of that one.
You're spoiling my future podcast idea of Beavis and Butthead explains the 90s here. Come on, man.
My point is that MTV did have a couple shows like this, but in the time when lots of people were creating videos, but not a lot of them were mainstream necessarily, there were a few shows like 120 minutes or stuff that was happening late at night where you'd get some airplay for some weirdo stuff, and Beavis and Butthead was arguably the best delivery mechanism for that. So very successful.
Yeah. And for people that are not our age, and maybe also not from the US, I cannot explain to you how, number one, subversive, and number two, universally beloved by young boys Beavis and Butthead was. It was the thing your parents told you not to watch because there was that one episode where they stuck a firecracker up a frog's butt and they were like, oh, they're torturing animals on this show. But it was funny, and I watched the shit out of Beavis and Butthead. Like, kind of everybody that I knew could quote Beavis and Butthead, watched it a lot. So the reach of that show for the young, specifically male audience was huge. And so putting a music video on there is going to get millions of kids to watch it.
That's a huge get. I wonder if Ween knew about it before it aired. And I feel like we'd be remiss, since we're talking about Beavis and Butthead so much here. They made a big splash on Saturday Night Live this past season.
Yes, with that skit where, again, I feel like it was aimed at people in their men in their mid 40s who were like, I know exactly who Beavis and Butthead are. And yes, I got that one right away.
Yeah. I think I read that it's the most watched sketch that SNL has produced like in the last 10 years or something crazy like that.
It is amazing how enduring their impact was, because like it was funny, and I still think it is funny and anchored my like early teenage years. But the premise of the show is pretty weak, but it's so much in the characters and the delivery, and the videos were such a big part of it that when I try to find some of it on YouTube now, I know they scrub some of the videos, or they try to pull them for licensing reasons, and the show loses a lot, I think, without the video commentary.
Yeah, which I feel like at first that was probably just a vehicle to have to write less material. I'm like, well, how about we just, for like 10 minutes of the episode, we just play music videos and talk shit on them.
And just do the Mystery Science Theater thing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, this is 1993 when they are on Beavis and Butthead. And Beavis and Butthead Do America, the movie, came out in like 1996. So they were like riding the wave of this early Beavis and Butthead popularity. And so I'm sure that Elektra was super happy about that. But once again, Pure Guava doesn't really sell all that much. Its peak position is number 93 on the Australian charts. Again, for some reason, the Aussies love Ween. There's a great anecdote in this documentary. It's the guy who owns John and Peter's, that club in New Hope, talking about a girl coming to their club, and she walks in and she's like, is this the home of Ween? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she's like, can I meet them? And he's like, yeah, like, absolutely, we could totally introduce you to them. They would love to meet you. They just happen to be on tour in Australia right now. And she apparently breaks down crying and is like, I'm from Australia and I flew here specifically to come to New Hope to meet Ween, and they're touring in my fucking city. Where I live right now is devastated by this.
That's such a pre-internet tale of woe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like 1998 and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea you were touring. Yeah, pretty fantastic. So, notably, Pure Guava, again, recorded exactly the same way as their previous albums, just as weird, just as experimental, just as juvenile. They didn't change because they had major label backing, which is pretty admirable. And I really appreciate the ability to not be scared by the moment. Like, you're given the opportunity to release an album on a major label. You have finally some backing. You got some clout. Maybe you're going to get a wide release. And you put songs like Flies on My Dick and Poop Ship Destroyer on your album. Like, they're not like, all right, let's clean it up. We got to be serious now, guys. We got some major label backing. No, they still put some pretty ridiculous songs on here.
I would love to have been in the room when, I don't know if they have a manager, but when they found out that Elektra was backing them, like, do you think they're like, cool?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Like, do you think they freaked out? I don't know. It's just hearing these guys, I just don't think they cared.
I don't think that they freaked out. I think that the more charitable version of it is that they thought, well, this is what got us here. So we're going to keep doing what got us here because people like it. So why change it up? We don't want to overcomplicate things. Let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Well, that's why in my tweet, I reference like the confidence to be able to put out all this weird shit. You still put out weird shit, and it happens to be your most normal thing. I've just always respected that. I think they were talented enough that they definitely could have sold out. They definitely could have gone much more commercial and softer. And I tip my hat to that because, yeah, it's confidence in what you want to do. And it's not like we're out there doing a bunch of other side projects either. Maybe they were that I'm just not aware of. But they were really all in on this thing. And so I think that's cool.
Yeah. So they now have their major label record contract. They've been on Beavis and Butthead, and they're on top of the world. But at this point, it's still just Aaron and Mickey, old Diener and Jeaner, making music as a duo. They are touring consistently, and so they're kind of thinking of live lineups, and they realize that they need to expand their overall sound a little bit. They add a drummer, Claude Coleman Jr., and this is when Andrew Weiss, who was from the Rollins Band, steps in and becomes the bass player for them while they're touring, and kind of convinces them that for their next album, they should actually go into a studio. So for like the first time ever, they go into a studio. Andrew Weiss is going to produce them. It's the first time anybody but just Dean and Gene has produced their music at all. And this leads to 1994's Chocolate and Cheese. And that was the first album of theirs that I bought and listened to after it came out, but I listened to it pretty extensively. It's kind of what made me fall in love with Ween. It is 16 tracks. It's exactly 55 minutes long. Features songs like Voodoo Lady, Freedom of 76, Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony, the HIV song, and Roses Are Free, which ends up becoming a staple of Phish's live shows, which why and how, I don't know, but it actually fits pretty well with their live sound. Like, it's a good song. It's catchy. And Phish has covered it like something like 50 times in the course of their last, 20 years.
I think they've covered it 50 times, spanning a total of 77 years of playtime.
Yeah, right. It can be a long one. And there's a quote, I think it's from Mickey, who is like, I like Trey Anastasio. Trey Anastasio is a great guy. Phish fucking sucks.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to read that quote.
Yeah, not a fan. But the album, again, they get a producer. They go into the studio. It becomes kind of a hit. And it reaches number 10 on the U.S. Heat Seekers charts. And again, that's for bands that have yet to chart in any one specific genre or anything.
So that would extrapolate to number 1 in Australia, right?
Actually, I don't know what it got to in Australia. Give me a second. I can find that out. Let's see what the chart performance is. Number 80 on the Australian charts overall. Number 80 overall.
Does this have anything to do with the cover of the album by any chance? Is that possible?
Hey, I'm sure that the teenage boy market for chocolate and cheese.
Oh, there it is. All right. Yep.
What they wanted and was rejected by the music studio, they just wanted the belt on there. And they were like, we're going to get like a big gay sailor guy in like a Speedo to wear the belt. And the record label was like, abso-fucking-lutely not. We need tits on the cover. And so they were like, fine, we'll just get like a really big chested woman and have her be on the cover then with the belt on. That works for us. But like in kind of a charmingly non-misogynistic way, they're like, how about like the queerest, biggest sailor guy we can find wears this belt? And the record label had to shoot him down.
Good to see the guys in the suits still, knew how to play
they know
things.
what's
Explain to me what the guy with the spikes is, the little character there. What's he called? You referenced it earlier.
Boognish.
Boognish. Is that just a little character they made up, or is that some reference to something?
That is a character that they made up.
All right.
I'm not going to get into the mythology behind the Boognish, but it's basically like they claim that they sprouted from the demon god Boognish, and that was sort of how the band came about while they were building their own weird ass mythology around it,
All right, I've heard enough.
So they had this album. It does really well. They changed up their formula. They went into the studio, and this is by far their most successful album to date. So what does a band that has been kind of struggling to break through do when they finally do kind of break through? They say, we're not doing that again. We're not gonna go back into the studio again. And in fact, they have a very acrimonious breakup with Andrew Weiss.
Whoa.
Because he is thinking, I'm going to produce you guys. I'm going to be in your band. And they thought, we're losing control of this. It used to just be us making all the decisions. And we don't like having anybody else try to make decisions for us. And so they have another album that they're thinking about making. And they decide that what they want to do to punctuate the breakup with Andrew Weiss, they take all of their recording equipment that they have purchased that was in Andrew Weiss's house. They take it out of his house and they move it to some shitty rental that they got on the beach at the Jersey Shore in the middle of winter. And they're like, we're going to make a new album here. And they start to record the stuff that ends up becoming the Mollusk. But in the middle of that, basically because they have this kind of pressure from the record company and they want to, again, sort of really distance themselves from the Andrew Weiss relationship, they then decide, well, for our next album, before we release this album that we're working on, we're going to go to Nashville and we're going to make a country album. And this is what becomes 12 Golden Country Greats. And they go to Nashville, and Dean and Gene do not play on that album at all. All they do is sing. They got a killer band of backup players that are like Nashville session guys. They called them the Shit Creek Boys. This includes Elvis's old backing choral quartet, the Jordanaires.
No way.
Oh, yeah. They got like absolute killers to go in there
Wow.
and record the music. And this is one of the things that I think is fucking hilarious because they have the music ready. The band plays the music, and it's almost like the dichotomy of Ween. The music's good, and the music is very serious and well composed and layered. And that's all that the musicians know. And then when they hear the lyrics later, many of them demanded to have their names removed from the project. And were like, I can't be associated with this.
Oh, so they didn't know that's what they were signed up for?
They had no idea that that's what they were signed up for.
Well, they didn't know Piss Up a Rope was going to be like the...
They probably didn't know it was going to be called Piss Up a Rope. They didn't. Apparently the song Japanese Cowboy they thought was like super offensive, and they didn't want to be associated with that. And, but like the songs on it are really fucking good. Like Help Me Scrape the Mucus Off My Brain, which is a ridiculous title. That's a really good song. Like it's just a nice country song. It's got a weird hook line, but everything else in it is really good. He keeps talking about like I had to spend the dog food money as like that's like the big sign of like everything's fucked up in my life. I had to spend the dog food money. I'm like, that's a good.
That's pretty
evocative
low.
line.
That's a good country line, yeah.
It's a good country line. This album also has what was at one point my son's favorite song, which is the song Mr. Richard Smoker, which you listen to it a lot before you realize that he's calling a guy a dick smoker.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
Richard Smoke.
And it's a really good song. It's actually like, it's catchy. It's got a little ragtime vibe to it. But, this is what they decide to do to follow up their successful album. They're like, let's make a country album that nobody wants to fucking hear. Almost like career self-sabotage.
It's my wife actually probably couldn't tell you anything about Ween, but she actually like legitimately likes that album. Like she knows it's a joke and all that shit, the lyrics anyway, but it does sound, it's very professional. I mean, that tracks that the musicians, gave it their all and were maybe a little bit bait and switched.
Yeah. But there's a very interesting timeline that's happening here. So they break up with Andrew Weiss. Dean and Gene, they go to the beach. It's the winter time. And basically within 3 weeks, they have written most of what I consider to be like the good songs on the Mollusk. All right. So the first song that they write is Cold Blows the Wind. And so they went to this crappy middle winter town. There's nothing to do there. It's dark. It's cold. And they have all this recording equipment, but they have no songs. And so Aaron just busts out a 17th century folk song book, and it has Cold Blows the Wind in it. But they don't know how to read sheet music, and so they couldn't figure out like what the actual song structure was. So they just wrote their own song structure to the lyrics that were already provided. And I thought that was like really cool. They're just like, hey, you know, these are pretty good lyrics. We can write this kind of like dark sea chanty-esque style song around it. Super cool.
We don't need to get in too deep into the details of the song, but I was actually sad you didn't put it on the focus list because I do really, really like the song. I think it's a stone cold classic Ween song. And that story in particular that you just told, Tom, had me Googling today on Amazon 17th century songbook. I think you and I should try that one. I want to do a whole record like that.
Get the next concept album teed up.
That sounds awesome, number one. And number two, you know, I kind of don't know why I didn't include Cold Blows the Wind, because I also very much like that song. I think it's really layered, and they do a really interesting thing where you can almost sing any melody over that by the end of the song, and it will kind of work because there's so many voices doing so many overlapping melodies in there. And it's very well constructed, and it makes sense that they didn't write the lyrics because the lyrics are really good, but they do also sound very old timey lyrics, you know.
I do think it showcases that they can be straight ahead and still make it really interesting and rich. And so it's just one of the ones that jumped out to me for that reason. But
yeah, but no, I agree. Fantastic song. So they record that. They write and record The Mollusk. They write and record Mutilated Lips. They write and record She Wanted to Leave. They write and record Ocean Man, and they write and record The Golden Eel, and then they head on off to Nashville to record 12 Golden Country Greats. What they don't know is that the house that they were staying in did not have any heat, and the fact that they had packed it full of recording equipment that was on all the time was heating the house. And so they turn off all the equipment, they leave, and they go to Nashville for a couple of weeks, and they come back, and the pipe underneath the sink had burst and flooded the house, which then iced over and ruins all of the equipment that they have in there. And just by happenstance, they had moved the box of master tapes off of the ground and onto the kitchen table and saved the project.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they
That's
basically
awesome.
are like, okay, well, this fucking sucks. They said that they literally just like picked through anything that they could find that was salvageable and threw it in a truck and went back to New Hope, PA, and then just recorded in their apartments and like other friends' houses and stuff like that for the last couple of songs on the album. But they had recorded most of it in that time. So this is a concept album. We've talked about this before. It's dark sea shanty material, the musings of someone tripping balls at an aquarium, basically. And
Which sounds pretty fun, actually. Like,
it does sound pretty fun.
I would not turn down the opportunity.
I mean, that explains the album cover. I'll say that.
Well, you talk about the album cover. You know who designed the album cover? Good old Storm Thorgerson, the guy who designed the Dark Side of the Moon album
Pink
cover.
Floyd, yeah,
Yeah.
all right. That's
Yeah, he also
badass.
did Houses of the Holy too. Was that him? And he liked the album so much that after designing the cover, he designed a whole bunch of just like extra material, like posters and other like designs and drawings just for free and gave them to them. It was like, I just love this album. This is so cool. Here's all the stuff that inspired me.
Yeah, I read that he basically was in full old man mode and thought all modern music was shit. And then he heard Ween for the first time. He's like, wait a minute, this is the best thing I've heard in decades. I need to do everything for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, honestly, a lot of people consider this a masterpiece. And when you consider that the #1 album of 1997 was Spice by the Spice Girls, they were probably a breath of fresh air for people who are looking for something a little different.
Yeah.
I was just going to invoke Spice Girls as the contrast in that story. So thanks for validating that.
Well, and also, you're getting to the end of the grunge era here. Everything was kind of sounded a little tired, and new metal was coming along, and that was supposed to be.
Oh yeah, you're opening the door for Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, talk about self-seriousness, right?
Yeah, totally. So, again, it's kind of been considered a landmark album. In 1997, Newsweek called it the 14th best album of 1997. And again, I think that it has...
What year did Hoobastank come out?
Oh, ouch.
I think that it has become very well regarded as it is aged as well. Because I do think that it still sounds kind of unique, and it still sounds very Ween, but it sounds like they took a step forward production-wise and in terms of song structure. And lastly, before we get into the songs, it must be mentioned that this album, The Mollusk, was the direct inspiration for SpongeBob SquarePants. And in fact, the creator, Steven Hillenburg, literally called up Ween, and they took his call because they're really approachable dudes, and like pitched the idea of SpongeBob SquarePants to them. And they were like, that sounds fucking great. You should totally do that. And then he asked them to make a song for them, which they did. They made a song and gave it to SpongeBob. It was considered a little too weird to be the title track for SpongeBob, but it was included in an episode early on. But like SpongeBob has created it's grossed like $13 billion in sales and stuff like that. So, and it's literally like, I think that Steven Hillenburg was just kind of like getting high and listening to the Mollusk and like looking at aquariums and was like, this fucking speaks to me, man.
And that is the answer to why Ocean Man has so many streams, right? That it was featured in the SpongeBob movie or something.
Yeah, the first SpongeBob movie, it plays like right at the end of the movie. And so a bunch of kids were like, oh, this song Ocean Man is great. Let me check out the rest of Ween's catalog. Oh, the HIV song. Let me listen to that one.
They got spinal meningitis. Back to your point about this being seen as their sort of magnum opus or whatever you want to call it. You made a comment earlier about the band viewing this as their best song. I don't think I realized how much they view this as their best song until I read a sort of oral history that one of the guys did with a reporter, where he sort of went track through track and shared some of those stories that you talked about, Tom, about the house getting flooded. I mean, they unequivocally hold this up as their best work. It's not even like they say, oh, well, I like this and I sort of like this other album too. Like, they really believe truly that this is like the best thing that they've ever done. And there's something to be said for that.
I just want to add to that. I read that piece as well and got some of that vibe. But one thing I liked about it, I think is an interesting point that links back to the artwork, is that they felt really confident once they had the tracks. They're like, this is really good. It's the best thing we've done. We need amazing artwork to match it. And so they call the guy who makes amazing artwork, and of course it worked out. And I have to say, even I didn't know before really today that Storm Thurgenson did the artwork, but I was looking at it all week going, that's pretty freaking cool cover. So it's just funny to me how the artwork of a record can help crystallize its classic status. I think that is true.
Yeah, it's a full package thing. And Alan, to touch on your point, I think that what they have always maintained is that this album was the closest to them perfectly executing the vision that they had for the album. And so I think that's why they like it so much. They're like, we wanted to do this thing and we did it. And maybe there's other songs and other albums other songs that are better than some of the songs on here. But when you consider this as a project, this is the project we went into with a clear vision and executed very well on that vision. And that's got to feel good.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's really hard to do. I mean, we could have a whole podcast just talking about that concept that you just threw out there, Tom, and that's the appropriate metric for success for any artistic project, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, Chocolate and Cheese, which again, I love that album, but they were thinking we're losing control, and they took the control back and then had their most fruitful experience from it. They must have been very validated in that decision. So good on them. So I think we've yammered on enough about the lead up to this album. Let's start talking about some songs. Now, we played Dancing in the Show tonight at the beginning of the episode. I will not subject you to that one again. We don't need to dissect that song. Yes, special needs child sings about their recital. We get it. Let's move on to the next song on our focus list, which is the next song on the album. It is the song, The Mollusk. I will note before we get into the discussion that this was the first and I believe only time that they have named an album after a song. They were like, this is the song. This is the one. Let's name it that.
It's a great song. I think this is my favorite song on balance. So there's one other one we're going to talk about I quite like. But just on a textural, sound texture level, I think they nailed it with that weird fluty synth
delay
escaping.
thing.
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know. It's a fluty synth thing. And apparently Dean made that kind of bed track and just sort of like, wow, this sounds kind of cool. And then just like, he said he left and he went fishing. And Gene sat down and was like, oh, this is great. And like, by the time he came back, he had put all the vocals and everything down. He's like, this is it. Like, it was like lightning in a bottle to them. The lyrics make no sense, but they're great. They're so good, but they're completely nonsensical.
I think it's a great example where the production just elevates. You know, it's a great melody too. I mean, I think everything about the song is good. The lyrics don't really have any meaning, like your pointing out, but the production elevates it, right? They do a really good job, I thought, in particular, of how the second voice is differentiated from the first. So it's this duet thing, and I think part of that is standard things, production decisions like doubling the voice, panning, reverb. But I also think it's a subtle performance thing in how they decided to approach those two vocals. So just, I feel like a lot of their material is good because it always keeps my ear interested and it always kind of keeps it guessing.
Yeah, nothing they do is stock that way. Like they don't really have a playbook other than to keep you on your toes. And I think what I like about this song, I think the song in and of itself is a great song and is among the best on the album. But the sequencing too. So because it comes second on the record, and that first song, which we already talked about, that is a song where if you're not a patient person, you could bail like very quickly on the record. But it's also part of my issue with it is that, you know, when I talked about the fact that they don't give a shit, it was never in relation to like their work ethic, or I don't think they mail it in. I just think some of their choices, that the first song is just so weak and lame in my opinion. But when that drops into this, there's like a feeling of, oh fuck, like this is something.
You discovered something.
I should stick around for this.
Yeah, right.
And maybe it's the lowering of expectations that like slaps you in the face a little bit. But I don't know. To me, it speaks to what I like about them and what I also find a little bit frustrating, to be honest.
I think of those off-kilter tracks as not exactly throwaways because they clearly put work into them, but more like speed bumps on the road to my enjoyment of the material. And there are a few too many speed bumps for me. That is my primary complaint about the album. But I hear what you're saying. The idea that you get through one and then you get rewarded with a tune like this is pretty cool.
I appreciated that for this song, which is one of my favorites off the album, I think, you know, echoing what Rob said. And it's because they don't pitch shift any of the voices. That is a trope that I found throughout the album, is that there's always like, okay, guys, we get it. Like third song in where they do that, I'm like, I understand you found the pitch shifter. That's awesome. But it goes on so much throughout the album. So I appreciated this. This didn't have that.
Throughout their career, number one.
Okay.
And number two,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive that both of those are Gene Ween's voices, and they are affected both of them to make them sound different.
They have a strange obsession with not wanting to ever sound the same vocally on two songs, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Like,
that would
it's not just
explain it.
pitch shifting. They also like are doing impressions on some songs.
It's like an affect.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, I don't even know what my real voice is anymore, man.
This had something that made me laugh when you guys were talking about the album with the 12 songs, but there's only 10 tracks. They like to play with numbers because there's a line in this in this song where he says, you see, there are 3 things that spur the mollusk from the sand, and then they list one thing.
Yes.
And I rewound it like 10 times, like, what are the other 2 things? You're killing me. So I appreciate that.
Keep you wanting more.
That's brilliant.
I will say, I also really love the little 3 guitar line over the 6/8 drums, that and then the drums are in 6/8 and it kind of like wraps itself around it really well. Again, it's just like, that's well thought out. That's really tastefully done on the same album that has the song Pink Eye on My Leg on it. Like, it's the duality of Ween, which is, yes, sometimes frustrating, but I think it's great. And that crescendo that they build to at the end of the song, it's really good. Like you said, it's not stock. It's very purposeful. It's very thought through.
They are great songwriters. They're great musicians. And I'm not going to say, oh, well, if they only took it more seriously, they could have accomplished more. They could have done whatever they wanted, really. So I respect it. But the talent is there for sure. I mean, they're A+ musicians, I think.
Well, there's also very much an argument to be made that if you cut 4 songs off of this album, it would be not flawless, but like substantially better. Like if you cut Dancing in the Show Tonight, Polka Dot Tail, I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot, and Pink Eye on My Leg, I think everything that's left is pretty fucking good. It'd be a 30-minute album, but it'd be a pretty fucking good 30-minute album.
I actually do really like one of their songs.
Same here. I didn't want to say.
I'm sure we'll talk about
I would have put a different one. I would have put a different one in there for sure that you didn't mention.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to talk about the next song on the album, which is I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot. Is this the one you guys like?
Right, this is... I fucking love this song.
Yeah,
And
same here. This is great.
I'm going to contradict myself in that I would put this in the bucket of their throwaway shit, but there's something about it. It's out of place. It doesn't make any sense, but I just think it's really cool. I don't know why. I think it fucking rocks.
It's so funny that you said that, Alan, because I wrote something very, very similar, which is it's definitely in the bucket of weirdo goofball songs, but I think I find it way more acceptable than some of the other lowlights on the album. Like,
And dude, the way they go for it on the guitar solo, I was literally laughing out loud. I was like, I can envision the smile that's on his face while he's playing this
With
solo
that auto-wah.
and having the
Yeah,
fucking
right.
time of his life.
There's that bomb sound effect at the end of each line where it's like, what are you guys thinking? This is great.
it might just be the high tempo that drives the song and makes it feel like it's kind of passing by you, even though it's not any different in length from the other material. I'm not sure, but it didn't really bump me. I get from context that it's Tom's low point and he could talk about it now, but that's not how I felt.
Listen, this song just seemed like it lacked some of the higher level touches that make me appreciate some of their other songs, and it feels more backward looking than I think a lot of the other material on this album. This seems like something that could have been on The Pod or God, Ween, Satan. It doesn't feel like something...
Or Tony Hawk Pro Skater just looped as you're going through the half pipe.
Yeah,
Just
listen, it's frenetic and it's got a rhythm to it. Frankly, I put this on the playlist and not Pink Eye on My Leg, which is actually my least favorite song on the album, because there's nothing to talk about in Pink Eye on My Leg, because nothing happens in the entire song. Except for a guy just goes,
Yes, I would
Well,
have.
don't you understand? That's really...
For my official low light, I would have picked either that or maybe Blarney Stone. That's the other one I think is worthless.
That was one of the songs that I was just like, I don't know that there's any need for this. It's funny, but...
By the way, Blarney Stone was like a live staple of theirs before this album. It was one of the songs that they had written beforehand, and apparently was a great sing-along good time in the clubs that they were playing. So we've talked before about how crowd response can sometimes warp your perception of what's a good song, because there's a difference between a fun song in a bar when you're drunk and a good song to listen to.
Yeah.
Were they doing it with a weird Scottish accent when they were in the bar, though? Like, that's
An
I think
octave
it's
lower.
how it's produced is a bigger problem than the song itself.
Oh, you think that they were doing just normal ass voices up there, Rob? Come on. But, I don't hate I'll be your Johnny on the spot, but there's something about the material that was recorded at that beach house in Jersey that feels singular, and this feels more like that classic New Hope sound that they've had on, because this was recorded back in New Hope, you know. So it's one of those, like,
Okay.
Interesting.
It does feel like a bolt-on, but for some reason, it just felt like, I don't know. I'm not even sure I could explain it, honestly, so I shouldn't even try. I just thought it was cool, and it violated all of the things that I'm saying I don't like about them. But maybe it was just this specific, the relentlessness of the song. And to your point, Adam, some of the sound effects are dropping in. Like, it just worked for me in a way that I really was not expecting.
All right, let's go on to the next song on our focus list here. It is the first song on the album. I really like this song a lot. It's got a very weird sound to it, that vocal manipulation. I know, Adam, it's not your thing, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bump me. And I think that they do it really well here. And one of the things that's kind of crazy is that literally they had to have a friend show them how to like use the equipment when they set it up at the house in Jersey, because they didn't know how to use any of the equipment, and they still managed to get this type of sound out of it. Like, that's really cool and really admirable. They are experimenting with this shit all the time.
It is another example of terrific production, I think. You know, the song itself is weird. The structures are weird, right? It's creative, but I think the production being so polished for me is what really elevates it. And as I was listening to this tune, I think you hear this throughout the record. It's a funny detail to me for some reason that these weirdos really love acoustic guitar. Like, acoustic guitar is everywhere on this record, right? The note I wrote for this one was that I think this shows off that they have a great sense of melodic interplay, meaning this idea of question and answer, or that a main melody that your ear is perceiving can continue across multiple instruments or multiple interlocking parts that might even be coexisting, but then one gets highlighted, or in this case, multiple weird vocal affects, whatever. I do think they're really good at that. It holds your attention.
Yeah, I like this song. This one took me a while to get my arms around. It's not one of those songs that hits you in the face at first. I did notice in just doing some cursory research that Kurt Weill cited this as like his favorite song of all time. And not that I think all or even most of his stuff sounds like this, but when I saw that, it like unlocked something for me in the way he writes songs and how he's got this very off kilter, sort of delivery. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool, but this was a little bit of a slow burn that grew on me, and I definitely, after a bunch of listens, would put it up in the top songs of the album.
In my mind, I have this little story that I wrote about them writing the line, accepting only fresh brine, and then just reverse engineering an entire song to get to that.
Based on that. Nice.
Yeah.
I particularly liked the forced rhyme of sassy, frassy, and lassie with Haley Selassie.
Dude, I also made a note of the Haley Selassie and couldn't figure out how to work it in, but I'm glad that made an appearance.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if they wanted to rhyme with sassy, frassy, or lassie, or they started with Haley Selassie and worked their way backwards.
Yeah. You don't know what's going on in the mind of Ween. It's a nightmare in there. But I think that my favorite part of this song is the percussion. And because they have not really, and they have a drummer on some of the songs on this album, but generally speaking, it's like Dean and Gene making drum patterns, and that's what the song ends up being. And I think that the percussion in Ween is a very underrated part of what makes them unique. And on this song in particular, I think that it might be my favorite part of the entire album. It's got the line like mutilated lips give a kiss on the wrist of the worm-like tips of tentacles expand, and they do that little like 1 2 3 4 on the hi-hat right there that matches up with that. That's like my favorite part of the entire album, and it's just so like perfectly thought out that like we're gonna say like a da 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 line, and let's just give it like a tss on the hi-hat when we do that, and then they repeat it again as the chorus goes on. But it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I do agree that the rhythmic elements are really solid. I had thought that they had maybe mapped a lot of this on a drum machine and then recorded it with a drummer, but you're saying that's not the case?
In some cases they have done that, but in a lot of the cases it's just a drum machine.
Yeah, I like that too. My only complaint, if I even have one, is I think he gets a little Anthony Kiedis-y with some of the like the line that you just said, kiss on the wrist of the worm, like there's something about it. I'm not saying he's trying to do that, but I've been so abused by that whole like faux rappy kind of Kiedis thing that I picked up on that a little bit, and it
Wow.
rubbed me wrong, but it's a great song. Overall.
Dean and Gene are not going to take our phone calls anymore, Alan, compared to them, to Anthony Kiedis.
I'm not saying they tried to do it. It's just that's where my mind went, and I couldn't really shake it, which is more the fault of Anthony Kiedis than them, to be clear.
All right. Let's go on to the next song on our focus list. It's the song "The Golden Eel."
This one a lot. And this following up on my previous comment, I thought this was a real drummer and a great use.
This is a
of
real
drummer.
drummer. Yes, this is a real drummer.
Yeah, because the kick in is epic and makes use of the drummer in a way that, not all the songs perhaps do.
I love, again, you talk about like the duality of Ween. My favorite part of this song is when it drops out and he does that like super shitty little guitar solo.
So you know what I think that is? Because I highlighted that and I listened to it like 20 times. I think he's playing it guitar solo, and I think they're detuning it with the tape because the harmonizing guitar solo comes in and plays the same wrong sour notes at the same interval. It would be impossible to try to match that with a second guitar. So I think they were just screwing with the
Like the drums kick in and then he starts to rip and he's like, no, I could have played this solo well. I wanted to play it shitty. It was on purpose that I played it bad.
It was a good listener boosh because literally the first time I heard it, I was like, "Cool solo, bro!" Like being sarcastic about it, and then it jumps into the real thing. Yeah.
I didn't love this tune. I think it had too many of the elements that I don't like. I didn't think it was a bad song, but it felt a little disjointed to me. I wouldn't put this up with the stronger songs on the album, but I didn't hate it either or anything.
Not brown enough for you?
This is the one that screams, I was on acid and I had a cool aquarium in my living room and I was by myself and I wrote this song. And like that's the whole vibe of this album.
Well, the other thing I noted, I do think it's another example of their deft production, let's call it. Whether you like it or not, I think they know how to work the controls really well. And I don't know if it's a vestige of the recording process or the mixing process or both, but the way the range of sound opens up in the chorus versus in the verse and how they're kind of very studiously holding back, the narrowing of the band of what you hear in those verse sections or even in the quote unquote bad solo section. It feels like a trick that like dance music uses where they're like holding back and then they kind of explode on you. I think it works tonally.
Alrighty, let's go on to the last song on the focus list that we're going to touch on. And for a song that one would think, listening to the songs on this album, that they would have highlighted as a potential single. Nope, second to last track on the album. It is the song Ocean Man.
Dude, catchy as hell. Catchy as hell. I was singing this after the first time through. Just that little line, Ocean Man. Like you want to sing it like the weird vocal affect too. And I'm washing the dishes and I'm just singing that word, those two words to my head over and over again. So well done, gents.
See, I kind of agree with Ween in the sequencing. I just don't think this is amongst their best material. I mean, it's fine. It's not. We've drawn that line in the sand, to be clear, of like goofball songs and non-goofball songs. It's on the non-goofball side, in my opinion. But I think on that side, it is a lesser song to stuff like The Mollusk or The Golden Eel or even Mutilated Lips.
It's got more single potential, though. Like that's where I look at it. I'm like, it's just so damn catchy. Like if you wanted a Ween song to play on the radio, this is the song. This is the song that's getting played on the radio.
Well, it worked because they got a lot of plays.
It seems like it was the right song for SpongeBob movie for sure. The thing I couldn't get past, and this is maybe just having too much familiarity with one of their previous other albums, Chocolate and Cheese, but there's a song on that album called Mr. Won't You Please Help My Pony, and to me it sounds so similar to that. Even the vocal treatment, I couldn't like distinguish them in my mind, or I couldn't get past that. I thought they sounded the same to me anyway. But I think it's a cool song for the most part. A little a little cheesy, but
Alan,
that's what
I
they do.
have no idea what you were talking about. That this song sounds like Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony. Like, that song is literally like part of the chorus is them just going, pony.
Well, not that part, but in the beginning, the Mister, won't you please help my pony? And it's a vocal treatment more than anything.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that song and that other album as well, and I didn't hear it. But I hear what you're saying now that you bring it up. I kind of get what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was more just my own anchoring to some things that I was already familiar with, and I couldn't. Adam, you have brought up a few times the way they modulate the pitch of the vocals, and it was like they hit the same button for that song in a way that just like rubbed me a little bit wrong. It's a cool song. I don't think if it had the cachet of being part of a movie that it would have nearly as many plays. Like, that's clearly what's bolstering it.
Alan, perhaps the lyrics can convince you. Ocean man, the crust of a tan man imbibed by the sand, soaking up the thirst of the land.
Yeah.
Oh, why would you put it that way?
Alan, I mean, can you see through the wonder of amazement at the Overman?
I think it's actually a decent song, but
After everything else on this album, I needed a simple pop song that I could sing along to, and this fit the bill, so thank you. This was like the dessert near the end of the album. Congratulations, you made it through.
And then they still managed to shoehorn in this very sugary pop song, like an out of tune mandolin doing like a little doo 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 doo, and it sounds great, but it's totally like an out of tune mandolin. Like, I don't know why that works, but it totally fucking works. All right, I think we have gabbed enough, and now it is time to get to the most exciting part of the episode, because I selected this album and have championed it, going back on to, not going back, but being included on the list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. I will not be voting, and I will be honest with you, dear listeners. I am in as much suspense as you all are right now. I have no idea what these votes are going to be. I am going to throw it first to Rob.
I think you went to your most likely friendly opponent, Tom.
Yeah.
And I am happy to please you with my vote of yes. I am glad stuff like this exists. While it is definitely not for everyone, I think it's important to listen to weird ass shit. And if you're a classic rock head and wondering who makes albums like 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus these days, where did that line go?
These are the guys, yes.
Here we are, man. This is Sgt. Pepper's on DMT. So I say listen to it.
All right. Excellent. Just to put the most maximal pressure on Adam, I'm going to go to Alan next.
all right. Well, there might not be much pressure on Adam, because I also am going to say yes. I've got some issues with it. I still have not embraced Ween to the maximum extent, although I like them more than I don't. I think they should be on the list. And when I looked at the rest of the list, I didn't see them on there. My favorite album of theirs is Chocolate and Cheese, which has already been mentioned. But I'm still not sure I would recommend that to people as the first Ween listen, or if they could only listen to one. I do think after absorbing this one for a bit, I think I'm in line with Ween themselves, that this is probably their strongest record, and I'm gonna say it should go on the list.
All right. Well, Adam, you're off the hook. You can
It doesn't matter.
Feel good about
All right.
it.
Yeah, right. I will abstain as well. No. I actually found the story, Tom, to be a bit more compelling than the album. I think that the way you described that, again, not that they don't care, but the fact that they had a major record label and didn't want to lose control and went back to them being their creative selves. I think that is a remarkable story.
Well, I am the Spalding Gray of rock and roll storytelling, so
Right, yes, absolutely.
I just can compel you in a way that
So Tom belongs on the list.
He does. Right.
That was, first of all, that might be the most highfalutin reference the podcast has ever made.
Thank you.
I'm the Michael Jordan of Frank Zappa's.
We've talked about Beavis and Butthead and Spalding Gray on the same episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
Together
worry,
at
folks.
last.
I'm going to Google that name as well, because I have no idea who that is. But yeah, this was a tough week to get through. There were a handful of hot tunes in here, but I think the story is great. I think these guys are weird. And Rob, I think you said it probably 100 episodes ago. Weird wins the day. So I'm going to say yes. I think you should listen to this album. And I don't know anything else by them. So Tom, I'm taking your word for it that this is the one to go to. So yes, go listen to Ween, folks.
You know what, Adam? I will put together a playlist for you of serious Ween songs that don't fall into the kind of like Cold Blows the Wind, that you can listen to and not be like, oh, this is like a joke song. They talk about dicks and stuff. Like songs that are like actual serious songs. You're like, this could fit on like any good album. There's a bunch of really good songs by them that I will put together a playlist for you for that.
Please do.
I want to hear that too. I bet the listeners do too, Tom. So now you're on the hook, buddy.
Oh yeah, I got no problem. I got to listen to more Ween. It's all right by me.
It's in the show notes.
Nice.
So there you have it. Everybody unanimously has voted in the Mollusk by Ween. Go out, listen to it, buy it on physical media because it looks cool as hell on your shelf. Again, I cannot stress to you enough how awesome the album cover is. If you're not familiar with it, go check it out.
And these guys are still working at gas stations, so they need the money. So go find a physical record store in New Hope.
They're rolling on that SpongeBob money now, baby.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I think they're on tour like right now as we speak.
Okay.
But they've taken some time off,
They're playing Philly in September.
Yeah, I got an email, a Ticketmaster thing that was like, oh, you've been listening to Ween. Do you want to go see them at the Mann Center? Yeah.
I only saw them that one time with you, Tom, in Berkeley, but it was a great show.
That was not with me. That was Phil. I did not go to that show.
Oh, boosh.
Gosh darn. Well, you are interchangeable in my mind, so that explains it.
Yeah. Apparently not to the podcast listeners, though. People have been like, where's Phil been? Can we get some more Phil? I'm like...
I don't think they realize that more Phil is not like the solution to anything.
No one ever asked for more Tom or more Rob or Adam, probably because we're on this too damn much. But speaking of listener feedback, one of the few things we have left to do is reach our hand, or I guess our tentacle, into that old mailbag and pull out a message in a bottle. So, Rob, bring it on home.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm going to reach my hand in the old mailbag. We got some good ones here today. So first, we have listener Glenn writing in. He says, Dear fellow complainers, I wish to register a complaint. But before I do, let me say that I truly enjoy your podcast. I'm a huge Beatles fan, and so I started with your Let It Be and your Abbey Road episodes, and I've been listening to everything else since then. And aside from a few factual errors, I liked what I heard. However, after your most recent episode, I felt I had to reach out and ask you to please do some Beatle fact-checking. I mean, I did many hours of it, but I guess I still got something wrong.
You.
Lest my neighbors call the police when they hear me yelling and cursing at your podcast. Now, in the Jesus Christ Superstar episode, you said Henry McCullough was the lead guitar player throughout the entirety of the band Wings. That is not accurate. Henry McCullough was the lead guitarist only from 1972 to 1973, encompassing their first couple albums.
We're getting fact-checked on ancillary Wings information. That is
intense.
My bad. Hey, I'll take it. I did say it. I threw it off the cuff. I did not fact check that. He has another one for us. Believe it or not, people out there know a lot about the Beatles. In your Let It Be episode, you said Ringo's one radio hit after the Beatles, it was It Don't Come Easy, and that it was written by Paul and handed to Ringo, when in truth, Ringo had #1 hits in the U.S. with other songs. Plus, he had 4 top 10 U.S. hits besides, and on top of that, it was Ringo, not Paul, who wrote It Don't Come Easy, albeit with a little, aka a lot, of help from George.
Maybe when you said it was his only hit, you meant it was his only good hit that he had post-Beatles.
Right. He does sign off as yours Booshly, which I appreciate.
All right. He wins me back. All right.
But okay, we have one more, and I'm gonna hype it up before I read it because it's a good one. This is Beth Ann, I want to say, writing from merry old England. And she writes, I think it's a she, apologies if not. Hello, I'm a Brit who stumbled across your podcast last month after seeing Green Day perform American Idiot and Dookie in full in London. So I came home and searched for as much similar content as possible to soothe the gig come down, and was first introduced to you all with fair, funny, and insightful deep dive into American Idiot. Luckily, it did make the list. Spoiler alert, guys, that one is way back in the catalog, but go check it out. And my fandom was thus cemented. Thank God it could have been a different story if you had given it the Nena Cherry treatment. I'm now midway through the back catalog on my journey from knowing absolutely nothing about music to pretending to know some things about music. And while I know I'm not fully up to speed yet, I feel I've begun to piece together some key rules of what 1001 Album Complaints believe would make the perfect album. Let me know if you agree. Number one, have a melody. As Rob makes clear so many times, he needs a melody. And absolutely, it must not be repeated too much or for too long, unless it's Runaway Train, then it's okay.
That is a deep dive. Wow.
It is indeed.
Nice.
You got me. Boosh. Number two, keep it short. Basically, any song over 3 minutes is unanimously hated. Get in and get out. Listen, I understand why you think that, but of course that's not exactly true, but yeah, fair enough. Number three, don't warble. We all know Adam hates warbling, any warbling whatsoever. Hit every note perfectly, damn it. Hold it solid and enunciate.
Wow, this is like some legit feedback. This is great.
Yeah, this is good.
Number four, keep the bass loud, make it funky, turn it up in the mix.
Hell fucking yeah.
Number five, don't rhyme girl with world.
Yep. Can't do that.
This is fantastic.
Number six, if you're an artist, don't be a dick. Anti-vaxxer like Clapton, Trump supporter like Loretta Lynn, general all-around dick like Morrissey or Marilyn Manson. It's going to affect how your music is perceived.
To be fair, I think with Loretta Lynn, we kind of were like, that's a shame, but like, what did you think a 90-year-old country star was going to think about the presidential election?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
She wasn't going to be like, super progressive, trans rights are human rights.
Next one is sample like you're the Beastie Boys. For absolutely no reason I've yet fathomed, sampling only seems to be universally adored when it's done by the Beastie Boys. So keep those samples niche, keep changing them up, and then just shout over them for maximum effect.
That's great.
It's a great email. I'm skipping through a few things for time, but you did a great job overall. I'm going to round it out here. 10, be the Beatles.
It's a pro move, you know? Yeah.
That's hard to argue against.
Simple.
Yeah.
No explanation needed. Okay, she closes by saying, I am hoping to use my newfound wisdom to create the world's best album. I've never picked up an instrument in my life, but how hard can it be? Many thanks for the laughs and insights into the albums I know, and more importantly, the ones I don't. Thank you so much for that email. That was a terrific email. We love when you write us any old thought you have on your mind or make corrections. Tell us where we got things wrong, add more context, and in particular, if you do it in a way that makes us chuckle and laugh. We love those the best, of course. But write us anytime you have anything on your mind, 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com.
All right, excellent. Thank you to everyone who wrote in, and thank you to everyone who was listening all the way to the end to get your homework assignment for next week. The Albinator had the week off. It spent the entire time dropping acid and playing around with those little like frozen sea monkey things. See if I can break it out of its reverie and get it to spit out another album for us. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... The album is Ace of Spades, and the band is Motorhead.
Damn.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
wasn't the Tony Hawk soundtrack already referenced on this episode?
I think so. Yes.
Nice.
All right. That's going to be a fun one.
That'll be a good test of our alleged bias against long songs, because that's in and out, man. I don't think there's a song longer than 2 minutes probably on that album.
I wonder if Lemmy's ever done anything worth mentioning in the bio section.
He's not a very interesting guy. So I don't know who's going to have to do the research on that one, but it's going to be a snooze fest. All right. Fantastic. Really excited. Looking forward to that, as we definitely are joking. Lemmy is a very interesting guy, and I'm also going to get an opportunity to reference the mid-90s Adam Sandler movie Airheads. I believe Brendan Fraser and Steve Buscemi are also in that, and they talk about Lemmy a whole lot in that, so it's going to come up quite a bit. Just, in case you got a little extra time in between listening to Ace of Spades, listeners, watch that movie so you can be prepared for all of my deep dives on that one. And that's going to do it for us here. Thank you so much for listening. From everyone at 1001 Album Complaints, we genuinely appreciate your interest in our little podcast project here. We hope you listen along with you next week to Ace of Spades. And until then, I have been Tom.
I'm Adam.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Rob.
Boosh.